Peter King of the mmqb.com joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show once again. Peter, that was some old school, good time Skins boys rivalry football last night, wasn't it?
It was really great. I said this morning that I wrote this morning that I didn't think it was one of the best Monday Night Football games I've ever seen, but I thought it was one of the most dramatic Monday Night Football games I've ever seen, just because, there's about 9 different angles that are all cool. Should Romo have gone back in? What about the horrible play calling by Dallas, especially in overtime? How in the world do you go at the end of regulation and at the end of overtime away from DeMarco Murray? Just sort of some mind-boggling things that happened last night.
So let's start with the Washington side of things, since they won. What do you think? I have to sort of pull back on this because when Kirk Cousins finished the game expertly against Jacksonville and then played as well as he did against Philadelphia, the whole discussion was, is this still RG3's job when he comes back from injury? What do you make of Colt McCoy and his performance and what it means for Washington or for him personally?
Well, I think it's certainly RG3's job when he comes back, unless Colt McCoy is perfect next week at Minnesota. You can't get confused right now by a game or two that a guy plays. And I'm not, demeaning anything that Colt McCoy did. But you traded 94 draft choices to get RG3. You don't know the answer to him yet. The whole idea is to keep Colt McCoy around. You might need him. You're probably going to need him. RG3's been brittle. So you keep him around. He's obviously beaten out Kirk Cousins as the backup quarterback, justifiably so. And you give RG3 every chance in the last, say, 6 games of this year and probably going into next year to determine whether he is your long-term quarterback in Washington.
And with Washington at 3-5, Peter, when you take a look at the playoff race in the NFC, and they win in Minnesota. They're 4-5. They're in this mix. And if Colt McCoy wins those 2 in a row, they're going to buy, and RG3 comes back healthy. You just never know. It's unbelievable how things can turn so quickly in the National Football League.
Well, especially because right after the bye, they've got Tampa at home. So it's very logical to think there's a decent chance that Washington could be 5-5 going into the last 6 games. Now, obviously, the problem after that becomes their next 2 games are at San Francisco and at Indianapolis. So I still think it's a real long shot. We're all assuming that this team that very recently had lost, 13 out of 14, is going to go to Minnesota and beat a team that is, can be a dangerous team on a given day. But yeah, Washington got a lot more interesting last night.
They sure did. And Dallas, just when you think they can be no more interesting, that happened last night. Where do you stand on Romo returning to the game, which is remarkable that we're even discussing that because when he went out, everybody was wondering if that meant the entire season. And then 2 possessions later, after Whedon scored in each of them or led them to scores, we were wondering if Romo should come back in the game.
Yeah, look, this all comes down to what the doctors saw in the locker room when they examined him and why Romo chose to take a pain-killing injection in the locker room. Obviously he wanted to get back in the game. Rich, I had an interesting conversation with Romo last week, and we were talking about DeMarco Murray and about sort of the Steven Strasburg effect on DeMarco Murray. Should they start to really cut down his carries so that he can make it through a 16-game season, which has always been tough for him to do as an NFL player? And he said, look, every one of these games that we play, just about every one, has the feel of a playoff game. And he said it's easy to sit here and say, yeah, we got to conserve this guy, but you just can't do that, not in all these games that are so important. I think that's his attitude. That's why he pushed so hard to come back in the game last night. In my opinion, I very much would have erred on the side of caution and not played him, especially after you see that Brandon Whedon, it looked extremely competent You know, these are two guys, Brandon Whedon and Colt McCoy. They were in the game dueling on Monday Night Football, and both of them got thrown out by the Cleveland Browns.
That's right.
Sometimes it's a pretty strange league, Rich.
It is indeed. I was looking for Brady Quinn somewhere on the sideline just to complete the triumvirate. And Justin Durant goes down too last night, Peter. I mean, we got to talk about the other side of the football.
You know, I thought Rod Marinelli has said this a couple of times this year that, you know, he's one of the most underrated players in football this year. When they lost Sean Lee, I thought that was, an awful loss for them in the off season, and it was a bad loss. But I think Justin Durant, the way he's playing, he had one of the great defensive games, I think, of the first half against Seattle. And I don't know how they're going to be able to replace him and get even 90% of his production. He was, Rich, I've always thought of Justin Durant, he's just a guy. He's played much, much better than that this year, and that's going to be a difficult, sideline-to-sideline player to replace.
And then here comes Arizona. How about that? Arizona's won, and because they have a better conference record than Dallas right now, Detroit is 2 in the playoff picture atop the NFC. And Arizona visits Dallas this week, and they're going to bring that blitz scheme. I mean, the Skins put something on tape for Todd Bowles to study in
No question about it. I mean, what's amazing is that, Rich, we're here at the halfway point of the season. After 8 weeks, the Arizona Cardinals with, New Orleans, San Francisco, Seattle, Green Bay, Dallas, Philadelphia, with all of those good teams in the NFC, there's only one unbeaten team in conference play so far in the NFC, and that's 4-0 Arizona. At some point, you've just got to look at this team and say, because everybody keeps waiting for them to fall to earth. Well, they're not going to. Todd Bowles is too smart to let that happen. Bruce Arians is too daring to let that happen.
He is daring, man. I love the way he calls a game. But before I let you go, in the 30 seconds I have left, Chris Brockman, why don't you read the poll question to Peter King? It's the number of wins that the Cowboys are going to wind up with this year, and let's get his vote. What are the choices again, Chris Brockman?
All right, Peter. Reactionary Tuesday. 7 to 8, 9 or 10, 11 or more wins this year for the Cowboys. Wow.
You go 11 or more.
They've already got 6.
That's right.
That means they got to go 5-3 down the stretch. I think they will go 5-3 down the stretch. I mean, they've got Jacksonville on their schedule. They got a game with Chicago, who might be mailing it in by then. Washington. I think they're going to win 5.
Peter, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Take care, Rich.
You bet. At SI_Peter King and the MMQB.com.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.